Hello everyone, welcome to CA Dreams YouTube channel. So this is the lecture number 11 in English and the lecture number 11 in Hindi I have already uploaded on the channel. So only one topic is left and that is your internal audit. So let us start with the topic. So as defined in scope of the standards on internal audit, internal audit means, now what is internal audit? Internal audit means an independent management functions which involves a continuous and critical appraisal of the functioning of entity. Wait, let me divide the definitions into some parts. So it is an independent management function. This is the first part. Till here it is the first part, which involves a continuous and critical appraisal of the functioning of entity. Second part, then with a view to suggest improvements thereto. Third part, and add value and strengthen the overall governance. Fourth part, and including the entity's strategic risk management and internal control system. Now, internal audit is made up of two words, internal and audit. What is audit? Audit is an independent examination of financial statements of an entity, right? And with a view to express an opinion thereon. So, audit is basically conducted by the auditor. Now, what is internal audit? Internal audit is again conducted by the auditor, but it is not to give an opinion, or it is not the views on the internal audit. When internal audit is conducted, the views are not expressed for the outsiders. The views are the opinion is not expressed for the users of financial statement, but the views, the reviews, the opinion is expressed for the entity only. Okay, so internal audit basically is the audit which is conducted through the management. It is conducted by the management. The management appoints an internal auditor and he does the auditing of the entity and he suggests the improvements to the entity. Okay, so let's start with the definition. You will understand if you couldn't understand till yet. So it is an independent management function. Independent management functions means the internal audit, it is the duty of the management. Okay, it is not the duty of anyone else, it is the duty of management. The management should appoint an internal auditor and should conduct internal audit in the entity. Okay, so which involves a continuous. Now what does that internal auditor do? So he involves a continuous and critical appraisal of the functioning of the entity. He critically examines that how the activities in the entity are going. Okay, and with a view to suggest improvements, and he observes everything that is going in the entity, and if he finds that something is lacking or something is not in a proper way, he suggests some improvements and add value to and strengthen the overall governance mechanism of the entity. And when the entity conducts an internal audit, the weaknesses are already identified, and in this way the governance mechanism that is going in the entity becomes more and more strong, and including the entity's strategic risk management and internal control system. Now what happens is, if internal audit is done, they are already aware of the weaknesses. Also they can also examine that where there is more risk and how the controls that are being implemented are being successful in preventing, detecting and correcting the risk. So if they find that there is some weakness in the control, they correct it after the internal audit. So after internal audit, when the proper audit is conducted by the other auditor who comes for expressing the views for the outsiders, for the users of financial statements, so what happens is they can give a reasonable assurance that is more appropriate for the entity. Okay, like for your exams also, your teachers say that you should appear for mock test before appearing in the before appearing in the final exams, before appearing in your the final CA exams, right? So what happens is, the mistakes you do in your mock test, there are very less chances that those mistakes are repeated in the final exam. So this internal audit is also a type of mock test only, and the audit that is conducted after this is the final audit. Okay, and on the basis of those opinion that is being expressed by the auditor, the people, the outsiders who are going to invest or participate in the company, they can properly rely on that decisions. Okay, so in this way what happens is that if you practice more and more in your mock test, then there are high chances that your exam will be more good, or there will be less mistakes in your exam. So similarly, when the mistakes are identified at the initial stage only, in the internal audit only, so there are very less chances that those mistakes will be repeated in the further, because if you find that this is all that is lacking in the entity, or here the controls are weak, so what you can do, you can improve it. And when the auditor will come, so what will happen, the auditor will be able to express a good opinion for the entity. Okay, so in this way, that is why we conduct internal audit, and this is what internal audit. Now, what are the applicability of provisions of internal audit? So as per section number 138 of the Companies Act, the following classes of companies shall be required to appoint an internal auditor or a firm of internal auditors. Now, this section number 138 has some provisions for this internal audit. So the following list has to appoint an internal auditor to conduct an internal audit. So they are every listed company has to appoint an internal auditor. Okay, then every unlisted public company. Now there are conditions then when an unlisted public company have to appoint an internal auditor. So it is P, B, T, O. What is PBTO? P for paid up share capital, B for borrowings, T for turnover, and O for outstanding deposits. Okay, so PBTO. Now what happens is when the paid up share capital of 50 crores rupees or more during the preceding financial year. So if the paid up share capital is greater than or equal to 50 crores, okay, then that particular unlisted public company has to appoint an internal auditor for conducting the internal audit. Now similarly, when the outstanding loans or borrowings from banks or public financial institutions exceed 1 crore rupees or more at any point of time during the preceding financial year. So when the borrowings become greater than or equal to 100 crores. Okay. So P for paid up share capital, B for borrowings. Now T, when turnover of 200 crore rupees or more during the preceding financial year. So it is greater than or equal to 200 crores. Okay, so PBTO 50, 100, 200 and outstanding deposits of 25 crore or more. Okay, so PBTO 50, 100, 200 or 25 crores. Okay, so it is greater than or equal to 25 crores. Now if any of the four conditions are there, wait, let me write here because I guess you're not able to see here properly. So it is PBTO, paid up share capital greater than or equal to 50 crores, borrowings greater than or equal to 100 crores, turnover greater than or equal to 200 crores, and outstanding deposits greater than or equal to 25 crores. So if this is the condition, then the unlisted public company has to appoint an internal auditor. Now for every private company, what are the conditions? For every private company, only these two conditions are there: when turnover is greater than or equal to 100 crore or more in the preceding financial year, or when the outstanding borrowing, it is these two conditions are there, B and T. Okay, so if the borrowings are greater than or equal to 100 crore or more, and when the turnover is greater than or equal to 200 crore or more. So if this is the condition, then those private companies have to appoint an internal auditor. Okay, so it is provided that an existing company covered under any of the above criteria shall comply with the requirements within 6 months of the commencement of such section. So these particular companies, if they fall in the given criteria, in the given requirements, so after they become applicable to appoint an internal auditor, so the date from which they become applicable, they have to perform the requirements, they have to obey the requirements, they have to perform the above criteria within 6 months of commencement of such section. Okay, so suppose in the month of January, what happens is one of the private company, its turnover exceed 200 crores, okay, in the month of January. Now from the date they have become applicable for this section, they have to appoint an internal auditor within 6 months. So that means they have to appoint an internal auditor till the last of June. Okay, So this is what they are saying. Now, who can be appointed as an internal auditor? What is the eligibility criteria for an internal auditor? So it is any chartered accountant or cost accountant in practice or not. Now, don't get confused with the company audit. And after you revise this topic, after you read this topic, revise your company audit as well, so that you do not get confused in the limits and in the criteria, eligibility criteria. Okay, there was chartered accountant in practice, and practice where in India, but here no such condition is given. Here it is either a chartered accountant or a cost accountant, whether engaged in practice or not. So practice, engaging in practice is also not a criteria here. Or such other professional as may be decided by the board to conduct internal audit. Now please make sure that there is only internal audit and it is not company audit or audit. Okay, so if there will be internal audit, then who can be appointed as an internal auditor? Chartered accountant, cost accountant, whether in practice or not, or any other professional by board. So the case study can come that while conducting and to conduct the company audit, the board appointed some professionals. So are they eligible? So they are eligible. The board claims that they are eligible because they have the right to appoint it. So you will write no, and the board can appoint internal auditor only for internal audit purpose. Okay, they cannot appoint company auditor. The company auditor's criteria is different. Okay. So the internal audit may or may not be an employee of the company. Now this is again important. The internal auditor may, an employee can also be an internal auditor. So this line simply means that internal auditor may also be an employee of the company. And in company audit, what was there? The officer or employee is disqualified for being an auditor. So this is also one of the most important line, and that is your internal auditor may or may not be the employee of a company. So what are the eligibility criteria for internal auditor? First point is your chartered accountant or cost accountant, whether in practice or not. Second point is your any other professional appointed by board, and third is your any employee, may or may not be. Okay, so I hope I'm clear to you all. Now third topic talks about internal audit function. Now what does an internal auditor do? So he simply performs assurance and consulting activities. Assurance regarding that the controls are working properly, and consulting activities. Now where he finds that something is lacking, he can consult it. Okay, so an internal auditor performs assurance and consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the entity's governance, risk management, and internal control processes. So there are basically three functions that internal auditor performs. First is your improve the effectiveness of the entity's governance. Second point is your improve the effectiveness of the risk management, and third is your improve the effectiveness of internal control processes. Okay, now the objectives and scope of internal audit functions. Now as per 610 SA 610, using the work of an internal auditor, what are the objectives? So they vary widely and depend on size and structure on the entity and the requirements of management, and where applicable TCWG. Now this internal audit functions, it depends on the size and characteristics and the structure of the different entities. Okay, so the requirements can be different from entity to entity, but the basic functions of the internal audit is divided into three categories to improve the effectiveness of governance. Second is the risk management, and third is your internal control processes. So the objectives and scope of internal audit functions typically include assurance and consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the entities governance process, risk management, and internal control. Now all these functions are given in detail. Okay, so let's read out first activities relating to governance. Now if internal audit is performed to check the effectiveness and to improve the governance, then what all activities are involved? So the internal audit function may assess the governance process in its accomplishment of objectives on ethics and value, performance management and accountability, communicating risk and control information to appropriate areas, and effectiveness of communication among TCWG, external and internal auditors, and management. So if the internal auditor wants to check the governance structure, governance appraisal, okay, so what he should do? He should assess what is the process, what is the governance process. So that means how is the performance going on, what is the performance of management, and is the management accountable for its entity. Okay. Second thing what you can check is communicating risk and control information to appropriate areas of the organization. Now each and every part, each and every area of organization, there should be a proper communication, and there should be not a communication gap. So everyone should communicate about the controls and risk. There should be a proper flow of information in the particular areas, and all the areas should be aware about their risk and controls. Okay. And effectiveness of communication among TCWG, external and internal auditors and management. And also they should check that whether there is a proper flow of information between the management and auditors and TCWG or not. So communication is one of the very very important aspect. Also they should check that whether the governance process in its accomplishment of objectives in ethics and values. So ethics and values also he should check. Okay. So if the internal auditor, when he will check the activities relating to governance, he will check all this: ethics and values, performance management, communication about the risk and controls, and communication of information between the TCWG management, external and internal auditor. Okay. So by this communication, what can happen is, suppose I am the internal auditor of any company. Say I am the internal auditor of company A. After the internal audit is done, if I am not able to communicate with the management or TCWG, then how will I tell them about the weaknesses, or how will I give them some suggestions about the improvement of the entity? So there should be a proper communication between me and the management or the TCWG. Similarly, if TCWG finds that management is lacking somewhere, so there should be a proper communication between them so that the entity can work in a proper manner. Okay. Now second point is activities relating to risk management. Now if the internal auditor wants to check that what is the situation of the risk management in the company, so the internal audit function may assist the entity by identifying and evaluating significant exposures to risk and contributing to the improvement of risk management and internal control. So the internal audit function, what will the internal auditor do? He may, by identifying and evaluating significant exposures to risk, he may find areas that where there can be more risk or where there can be less risk. Okay. And contributing to the improvement of risk management and internal control. Now if the internal auditor finds that the controls that are being imposed on the particular risk, they are not able to prevent, detect and correct it, so what will they do? They will give some suggestions to improve the controls. So this is how the activities, the internal audit can be helpful in the risk management. Okay. So the internal audit function may perform procedures to assist the entity in detection of fraud. So it may help the entity in detecting all the areas where there is a high risk of material misstatement or fraud, and they can suggest some improvements for the controls. Okay. Now third point is activities relating to internal control. Now first they will do the evaluation of the internal control. Internal audit function may be assigned a specific responsibility for review controls. They will review the controls, evaluate their operation and recommend improvements. Here they were basically checking that which areas have higher risk or which areas have lower risk, and here they are checking the internal controls that is being implemented to reduce the risk in the entity. So in doing so, the internal audit functions provide assurance of the control. Now what happens is, when the internal auditor checks the control and he finds that okay, these controls are fine, so what will happen is there will be assurance on the controls. The management and TCWG will be able to trust on the controls that is being implemented by them. For example, the internal audit function might plan and perform tests or other procedures to provide assurance to the management and TCWG with governance regarding the design, implementation and operating effectiveness of the internal controls. So through internal audit, the internal auditor can tell the management and TCWG that okay, this is the design and this is how the controls are being implemented, and okay, these controls are being able to prevent, detect the risk of material misstatement, or if he will find that there is some weaknesses, he will suggest the same to the management and TCWG. Okay. Now second is your examination of financial and operating information. So the internal audit function may be assigned to review the means used to identify, recognize, measure, classify and report financial and operating information, and to make a specific inquiry into individual items, including detailed testing of transactions, balances and procedures. So this is also the management can the internal auditor can crossly check the assertions. Okay, so the internal audit function may be assigned to review the means that means the source of information. Okay, so the source of information or the information on the basis of which financial statements are being prepared. So the internal auditor may check that information through testing of transactions, balances and procedures. That means by using several assertions, the entity can the internal auditor can conclude that whether the means of information that is being used is correct. So what he can do, that whether the information is complete and whether there is existence of this or that particular asset. Similarly, there are various assertions through which the auditor can conclude that whether the information that is being used is correct or incorrect. Okay, third is your reviewing of operating activities. So the internal audit function may be assigned to review the economy, efficiency and effectiveness of operating activities, including non-financial activities of the entity. So this is how the operations in the entity are going on. So he may observe and he may check that whether it is going effectively and efficiently or not. Okay, and review of compliance with laws and regulations, and the internal auditor can also check that whether the work that is going on is in compliance with the laws and regulations or not. Okay, so this is how the internal auditor can help the entity in the improvements, and these are the functions that is being applied by the internal auditor. Okay, so I hope that I could able to help you in this chapter, and this was the first chapter in English that I explained, and I might not be that fluent in English, but I'm trying my best to explain you, and definitely there will be the explanation will be better in the further videos. So please let me know if you need any other chapter in English explanation. I will definitely bring it. So please do comment that which chapter you want, and I will the chapter for which I will get maximum comments, I will bring that chapter in the next videos. Okay, so till then keep revising and all the best. Thank you so much.